I watched my sister load her cart with prime rib, king crab legs, and bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly barracks allowance. She was humming, actually humming, as she piled on artisan cheese and imported chocolates. The cart was so full she had to get a second one. She didn't see me. I made sure of that, standing behind the end cap of canned vegetables, my heart pounding with an anticipation I'd been nurturing for 6 months. Because this wasn't the first time I'd lived through this day. The first time I'd been at work on base when I got the call, my military ID had been flagged for suspicious activity. By the time I understood what was happening, my life was already over. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge. My sister's tearful testimony about how I'd changed after deployment, how she'd tried to help me, how she'd had no idea I was involved in fraud. She'd taken everything. My benefits, my reputation, my future, and she'd smiled at my mother's funeral 2 years later, the funeral I couldn't afford to attend because I was working 3 jobs just to eat, and told everyone how tragic it was that her troubled sister had abandoned the family. I died at 32, alone, broken, in a roach-infested apartment from an infection I couldn't afford to treat. Then I woke up on my 23rd birthday, 6 months before this moment, with every memory intact and a gift I hadn't asked for: a second chance. Amanda wheeled both carts toward the checkout, and I followed at a distance. She was wearing her favorite Lululemon set, the one that cost $300. Her hair was freshly highlighted. Her nails were done. All of it funded by the systematic destruction of my life that had already begun, even though I hadn't known it yet the first time around. The first time I'd been so trusting, so stupid. When Amanda asked to borrow my military ID just once to buy groceries because she was between jobs and struggling, I'd said yes. I'd thought I was helping my little sister. I'd thought the commissary would just check the card, ring up her stuff, and that would be it. I didn't know she'd been doing it for months, building up to bigger and bigger purchases. I didn't know she'd been reselling the goods online, making thousands. I didn't know that she'd been forging my signature on documents, using my identity to open credit cards to apply for loans. I didn't know that she'd been setting me up to take the fall for all of it while she walked away clean. This time, I knew everything. Amanda reached the checkout line. I watched her pull out my military ID from her wallet. My wallet, actually, a Kate Spade one she'd borrowed last month and never returned, and hand it to the cashier with a confident smile. The cashier scanned it, scanned the items. Amanda made small talk about the weather. I counted down in my head. 5, 4, 3, 2, bad suicides. Ma'am, could you wait here for just a moment? The cashier's smile didn't waver, but her eyes had changed. She pressed a button under the counter. Amanda's face showed a flicker of confusion. Is something wrong? Just a routine verification. It'll only take a minute. I moved closer, still out of Amanda's line of sight, but close enough to see everything. Close enough to savor this. The commissary manager appeared first, walking quickly from the back. Then, through the sliding doors at the entrance, I saw them. 2 military police officers, their uniforms crisp, their expressions neutral and professional. Amanda saw them too. Her face went pale. Amanda Richardson, one of the MPs said, approaching her. Yes, but we need you to come with us. You're being detained for unauthorized use of a military identification card, fraud, and theft of government property. What? No, there's been a mistake. This is my sister's card. She lets me... Your sister, Staff Sergeant Jessica Richardson, reported her ID stolen 6 months ago, the MP said. We've been monitoring for its use. Ma'am, you need to turn around and place your hands behind your back. I stepped out from behind the end cap then, and our eyes met. The recognition hit her in stages. First confusion, then the dawning realization, then absolute horror. Jess? Her voice cracked. But you told me I could... I never said anything, I replied calmly, because you never asked, not this time. This was where it had gone differently. 6 months ago, when I woke up in my 23-year-old body, the first thing I did was report my military ID as stolen. I reported it before Amanda ever asked to use it, before she could use it. Then I got a new one and locked it in my barracks safe. But I kept my old ID hidden in my room at Mom's house, the house where Amanda still lived, rent-free in her childhood bedroom. the house she still had access to, and I waited. It took her 3 weeks to find it. I knew because I'd set up a camera, just a cheap nanny cam, disguised as a phone charger. I watched her take it, watched the calculation in her eyes. She thought I'd simply lost track of it. She thought she was so clever. After that, it was just a matter of watching the systematic fraud unfold. The small purchases at first, testing the waters, then bigger ones. Each time, logged by the MPs I'd already alerted. Each time, building the case. I'd given them everything. Dates, times, patterns. I'd documented her online resale accounts where she was moving the commissary goods. I'd tracked every penny. And I'd waited for her to get confident enough, greedy enough, to go for the big score. Prime rib, king crab, premium wine, a cart full of evidence. "You set me up," Amanda hissed as the MP cuffed her wrists. "You bitch! You set me up!" "No," I said quietly, stepping closer. "I protected myself. You destroyed yourself, just like you were always going to." The second MP was reading her rights. People were staring. The manager was on the phone, probably calling the base commander. This was going to be on the base news. Everyone would know. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Jess, please, I'm your sister. You can't do this to me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave me permission." "So you are saying you used the ID?" the first MP asked mildly. "You're confessing to that right now?" Amanda's mouth snapped shut, but it was too late. Everything she said was being recorded. I watched them lead her toward the exit, and I felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. I felt light, like I'd been carrying a crushing weight and had finally set it down. In my first life, this was where my nightmare began. In this life, it was where Amanda's did. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The thing about living your life twice is that you remember everything. Every betrayal. Every lie. Every moment when someone you loved drove a knife into your back and twisted. I remembered the court-martial. I remembered my lawyer, the public defender who didn't believe me, who advised me to take a plea deal. I remembered the prosecutor, a major with political ambitions, who made an example out of me. I remembered the commander who signed off on my discharge, who looked at me with such disgust. But most of all, I remembered Amanda's testimony. She'd cried on the stand, real tears streaming down her face as she told the court about her troubled older sister, about how I'd come back from deployment different, about how I'd gotten involved with the wrong people, how I'd started acting erratic, how she'd tried to help, but I'd pushed her away. She'd lied about me borrowing money from her that I'd never paid back. She'd lied about violent outbursts that never happened. She'd painted a picture of a disturbed veteran spiraling out of control, and everyone believed her because I couldn't prove otherwise. The prosecution used her testimony to argue that I was mentally unstable, that I'd committed fraud to fund what they implied was a drug problem. There was no drug problem. There were no drugs in my system. But the implication was enough. I lost everything, my rank, my benefits, my honor. And Amanda? She walked away with thousands of dollars in stolen goods sold online under fake accounts. She walked away with the credit cards she'd opened in my name, which she maxed out and left me to deal with. She walked away with our mother's sympathy, her position as the good daughter secured. This time, I was taking it all back, and more. The base commander called me in 2 days after Amanda's arrest. Colonel Morrison was a hard woman, tall and lean with silver threading through her close-cropped hair. She'd been fair to me in my first life, right up until she wasn't, until the weight of evidence and Amanda's testimony made her believe I was guilty. This time, she looked at me with something like respect. "Staff Sergeant Richardson," she said as I stood at attention in her office. "At ease. Sit." I sat. "I've reviewed the case against your sister," she continued. "The JAG office has everything they need. This is going to trial and it's going to be public. I need you to understand what that means." "Yes, ma'am." "Your family is going to be under scrutiny. Your mother, I understand she's ill?" "Cancer. Stage 3. She had 2 years left in my first life, but I was already working on changing that. She's in treatment, ma'am. This is going to be hard on her. It would have been harder if my sister had succeeded in framing me for federal crimes, ma'am." Colonel Morrison's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Indeed. The MPs tell me you were very cooperative." very thorough in your documentation. I wanted to make sure there was no doubt, ma'am. There isn't. She leaned back in her chair. Between you and me, Richardson, I've seen a lot of fraud cases. Usually the service member either doesn't realize what's happening until it's too late, or they're complicit. The fact that you caught this early, that you reported it properly, that you helped build the case, that shows good judgment. That shows integrity. If only you'd believed that the first time, I thought. But I just said, thank you, ma'am. Your sister is looking at up to 15 years in federal prison. The U.S. attorney is throwing everything at her. Fraud, identity theft, theft of government property. She picked the wrong institution to steal from. Morrison fixed me with a sharp look. She's going to try to make a deal. They always do. She's going to offer to testify against you, claim you were involved. My heart rate stayed steady. I'd prepared for this. There's no evidence of that, ma'am, because it didn't happen. I know, but I need you to be ready. Your sister is going to try to destroy you to save herself. She's going to lie, and her lawyer is going to try to use your relationship against you. I understand, ma'am. Do you? Morrison leaned forward. Because from what I'm reading, you two were close. She lived with your mother. You've known her your whole life. When she gets up on that stand and cries and talks about how you set her up, how you planted evidence, how this is some kind of vendetta, can you handle that? I met her eyes. Yes, ma'am, I can handle it. Because I'd already lived through worse. I'd already been the one on trial, the one accused, the one whose life was ripped apart. Amanda didn't know it yet, but she was about to learn what that felt like. And I was going to watch every second of it. Mom called me that night. I was in my barracks room studying for a certification exam I hadn't bothered with in my first life. Everything was different now. Every choice I made was calculated to build a better future. Jess? Her voice was thin, tired. The chemo made her weak. Honey, can you come home? We need to talk about your sister. Here it was, the guilt trip, the family loyalty speech. In my first life, I'd been living off base in a shitty apartment, easy to avoid. This time, I'd stayed in the barracks specifically to create distance, to have a legitimate excuse. I can't tonight, Mom. I have duty tomorrow morning. This is important. So is my career. A pause, then quieter. Amanda says you set her up. Amanda was caught red-handed using my stolen military ID to commit fraud. What does she think set up means? She says you left it out for her to find, that you knew she was struggling and you used that against her. I closed my eyes. In my first life, I'd believed Amanda's lies about other people. Now Mom was believing Amanda's lies about me. History rhyming, if not repeating. Mom, I reported that ID stolen 6 months ago. If Amanda found it in the house after that, she stole it. If she used it after I reported it stolen, she committed a crime. Those are facts, not a setup. But why didn't you tell her you'd reported it? If you'd just warned her, why would I warn her not to? Commit a federal crime, why would I need to? Most people don't need that warning, Mom. She's your sister. And I'm her sister. Did that stop her from stealing from me? Silence on the line. Then, she made a mistake. She's scared. They're saying she could go to prison for years. Jess, she could go to federal prison. You have to help her. No, I don't. Jessica Marie Richardson, Mom. I kept my voice even, though my hands were shaking. Amanda didn't make a mistake. She made hundreds of mistakes, over and over, stealing from me and from the government. She knew exactly what she was doing. And now she's facing consequences. But you could talk to them. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft and fraud. Families forgive. Did Amanda think about family when she was using my identity to commit crimes that could have destroyed my career? My life? Because that's what would have happened, Mom. If I hadn't caught this, if I hadn't reported it, I would be the one facing charges right now. Amanda would have let me go down for what she did. She would have testified against me to save herself. More silence. I could hear Mom breathing, ragged and uneven. You don't know that, she finally said. But I did know that. I knew it with absolute certainty because I'd lived it. And part of me wanted to scream that at her, wanted to explain everything. But I couldn't. No one would believe me. They'd think I was crazy. I know my sister, I said instead. And so do you, if you're honest with yourself. How many times has she borrowed things from you and never returned them? How many times has she asked for money she never paid back? How many times has she lied to you about where she was, what she was doing, who she was with? That's different. It's not different. It's a pattern, and this time, the pattern caught up with her. Jess, please. She's 20 years old. She's a kid. This will ruin her life. 20 years old, not a kid. Old enough to serve in the military herself. Old enough to know right from wrong. Old enough to systematically plan and execute a fraud scheme. She ruined her own life, I said. I'm sorry, Mom, I really am, but I can't help her. I won't. Then I don't know who you are anymore, Mom said, and hung up. I sat there in the silence of my barracks room, phone still in my hand, and I didn't cry. I'd cried enough in my first life. I'd cried when Mom chose Amanda over me, when she believed Amanda's lies, when she let Amanda move back home while I struggled alone. This time, I knew how it would go. Mom would forgive Amanda, would believe her lies, would blame me for not being understanding enough. And I would let her because I'd already mourned this relationship once. I had more important things to do. The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom in my dress uniform, every ribbon and badge perfectly placed, the chan on my head. Prosecutor, a sharp-eyed captain named Reeves, had prepped me extensively. Your sister's defense is going to be that this was a family misunderstanding, she told me, that you gave her permission, or at the very least that you were negligent in securing your ID. They're going to try to paint you as vindictive. Let them try. And they did. Amanda's lawyer was a civilian, expensive-looking in his tailored suit. Federal public defenders were overwhelmed, but somehow Amanda had scraped together money for private counsel. I wondered where she'd gotten it, then decided I didn't care. Amanda sat next to him looking small and scared, wearing a modest dress instead of her usual designer clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, the picture of innocent youth. The judge was a federal magistrate, a woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense expression. She reviewed the charges, and Amanda's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this case is a family matter that's been blown out of proportion. Ms. Amanda Richardson has no criminal history. She's a 20-year-old woman who made a mistake, yes, but not a criminal one. Her sister, Staff Sergeant Richardson, had a pattern of leaving her military ID unsecured. My client, living in the same household, used it under the reasonable belief that her sister was aware and had tacitly consented. Your Honor, Captain Reeves interrupted, Staff Sergeant Richardson reported the ID in question as stolen 6 months before its first unauthorized use. She filed a formal report. She was issued a replacement ID. The defense is asking this court to believe that Ms. Amanda Richardson somehow didn't realize that using a reported stolen ID was a crime, which strains credulity. The judge looked at Amanda's lawyer. Counselor, did your client live in the same house as the victim at the time the ID was reported stolen? She did, Your Honor, and did Staff Sergeant Richardson inform anyone in the household that she'd reported the ID stolen? Amanda's lawyer hesitated. The victim claims she did, Your Honor, but I'm not asking what the victim claims. I'm asking if your client was informed. I'd told Mom, in detail. I'd sent her a text message and followed up with a phone call, specifically saying that if she found my old ID anywhere in the house, she should destroy it because I'd reported it stolen. I'd documented everything. Captain Reeves provided the text messages, the phone records, Mom's written statement confirming I'd told her. The judge's expression hardened. So, Ms. Amanda Richardson either knew the ID was reported stolen, or she took it without informing anyone in the household, which would still be theft. Either way, Counselor, your argument doesn't hold water. Your Honor, siblings borrow things from each other all the time. Military IDs aren't things, counselor. They're federal documents. Using someone else's military ID is a federal crime, and I think your client knew that. Bond is set at $50,000. Trial date will be set for, she consulted her calendar, 3 months from today. Do not leave the state, Miss Richardson. Amanda's face crumpled. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper to her, and I saw her shake her head frantically. She couldn't make bond, not unless... I looked past her and saw Mom in the gallery, pale and drawn. She'd come. Even though I'd asked her not to, even though the stress was bad for her health, she'd come to support Amanda. She wouldn't look at me. Fine. I looked away first. Amanda made bond 3 days later. Mom had borrowed against the house. Our childhood home, the one Dad had bought before he died, the one that should have been secure and paid off. Mom had taken out a loan she could barely afford to bail out the daughter who'd committed crimes against the other daughter. I found out from a mutual acquaintance, not from Mom herself. We weren't speaking. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Even knowing how this had gone before, even knowing that Mom would choose Amanda every single time, it still hurt. But I'd prepared for this too. One of the things I'd learned in my first life, in those desperate, awful years after my discharge, was how to investigate, how to dig, how to find information people wanted hidden. I'd been looking for proof of Amanda's fraud then, trying to clear my name, and I'd found some. Just not enough and not in time. This time, I'd had 6 months and the full resources of military investigations on my side. And I'd found everything. Amanda didn't just steal from me. She stole from everyone. She had 3 other people's credit cards in her possession when she was arrested. The MPs hadn't made that public yet, but I knew. The cards belonged to her ex-boyfriend, her former roommate, and Mom's neighbor. She'd been running a sophisticated identity theft ring, using her charm and access to steal financial information, then making purchases. She'd resell online. The commissary scheme with my ID was just one part of it. She'd also been using my identity to apply for loans, to open credit cards, to rent equipment she'd never returned. Every single instance was documented now. Every victim identified. Captain Reeves had been delighted when I brought her the evidence. "This changes everything," she'd said. "We're not just talking about unauthorized use of a military ID anymore. This is a pattern of fraud. This shows criminal intent and sophistication. The U.S. attorney is going to want to make an example of this." "Good," I'd said, because Amanda had made an example of me in my first life. Fair was fair. The calls started 2 months before trial. Amanda called me 17 times in the first week. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, her voice progressing from apologetic to angry to desperate. "Jess, please, we need to talk." "Jess, you're being ridiculous. I'm your sister." "Jess, Mom is making herself sick over Iniquius. This. Do you even care?" "Jess, my lawyer says if you just talk to the prosecutor, tell them this was a misunderstanding." "Jess, answer the fucking phone." I deleted them all without listening to the end. Then she tried showing up at the base. Security stopped her at the gate. She didn't have authorization to enter, and when she tried to claim she was there to see me, they called my unit. I told them I didn't want to see her. She made a scene, cried, shouted about how I was her sister, how I was abandoning family. The MPs escorted her off base and told her if she came back, she'd be arrested for trespassing. She posted about it on Facebook. Poor Amanda, betrayed by her cruel sister. She didn't mention the fraud charges. She didn't mention using my ID. She just painted herself as a victim of a vindictive sibling. Some people believed her. Some people I'd gone to high school with commented with sympathy, with outrage on her behalf. They didn't know the truth. They just knew. Amanda's version? That I'd reported my ID stolen to get her in trouble, that I was jealous of her, that I'd always been competitive and mean. I didn't respond, didn't correct the record, let her dig her hole deeper, because every Facebook post, every public statement, every lie she told was creating a record. Captain Reeves was screenshotting it all. "She's establishing a pattern of dishonesty," she'd explained. "The more she lies publicly, the less credible she'll be on the stand." And Amanda would have to take the stand. Her lawyer had decided that was her only chance, to testify, to cry, to claim I'd set her up out of sisterly rivalry. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Mom called me the night before the trial. I was surprised she still had my number. We hadn't spoken in 2 months. I'd sent her information about her cancer treatment. A specialist I'd found in my first life, too late to help her then, but in time now, she hadn't acknowledged it. Jess, her voice was hoarse. Please don't do this. I was in my barracks room, dress uniform already laid out for the morning. I'd requested leave to attend the trial. Colonel Morrison had approved it immediately. I'm not doing anything, Mom. I'm testifying truthfully, that's all. You're destroying your sister's life. Amanda destroyed her own life. I'm just telling the truth about it. She made a mistake. Stop calling it a mistake. The words came out harder than I intended. I took a breath. Mom, Amanda committed crimes, multiple crimes, against multiple people. She stole credit cards from her ex-boyfriend. She stole from your neighbor. She stole from her old roommate. She stole from me. This isn't a mistake. This is who she is. Silence. Then, how do you know about the other victims? Because I investigated. Because unlike you, I actually looked at what Amanda was doing instead of just believing her lies. She's my daughter. So am I. The words hung in the air between us. I heard Mom's breath catch. So am I repeated quieter. I'm your daughter too, but you've never chosen me, not once. Every time it came down to Amanda or me, you picked her. Even now, when she committed federal crimes, you're asking me to protect her. You're not asking her to take responsibility. You're not asking her to face consequences. You're asking me to lie for her. Again. I never asked you to lie. You did, the first time. The words slipped out before I could stop them. What? I closed my eyes. Nothing. It doesn't matter. What matters is that tomorrow, I'm going to court, and I'm going to tell the truth. Amanda used my identity to commit fraud. She stole from me and from others. Those are facts. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise to make you feel better about failing to raise her properly. How dare you? I dare because someone has to. Dad died when I was 8, and you turned Amanda into your golden child. Everything she did was excused. Every lie was explained away. Every theft was borrowing. Every broken promise was her being young and learning. Well, she's learning now. She's learning that actions have consequences. You sound so cold. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. What happened to you? I died, I wanted to say. I died alone and broken because my sister destroyed me and you let her. I died knowing you'd believed her lies, knowing you'd chosen her over me one last time. But instead I said, I grew up. Finally. And I hung up. The trial was everything I'd prepared for and nothing like I'd expected. Amanda looked so young at the defense table, so fragile. She wore a simple navy dress, pearls at her throat, probably borrowed from Mom. Her hair was in a neat bun, no designer clothes, no expensive accessories, the picture of innocence. The jury was a mix, 6 men, 6 women, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. Military community members, federal employees, civilians who'd been vetted extensively. They looked serious, attentive. Captain Reeves was immaculate in her dress uniform. The defense attorney, Morrison, no relation to my commander, was smooth and confident in his expensive suit. The opening statements laid out 2 different stories. Captain Reeves described a pattern of fraud and identity theft. A young woman who systematically stole from everyone around her, who used her sister's military credentials to commit federal crimes, who showed no remorse and no intention of stopping. Morrison described a confused young woman who'd made a mistake. A girl who'd grown up with a military sister, who'd sometimes used that sister's ID for convenience with permission, who'd crossed a line without realizing it. Both stories couldn't be true. I was the prosecution's first witness. Captain Reeves walked me through it methodically. My service record, my responsibilities on base, my security clearance, the importance of protecting my military ID. Staff Sergeant, Richardson, when did you first realize your military ID had been stolen? I didn't realize it was stolen, ma'am. I reported it as stolen as a preventative measure. Can you explain? This was it. The part Morrison would attack. The part that sounded suspicious if you didn't know the full context. I'd noticed items going missing from my room at my mother's house. Small things, cash, a piece of jewelry, my old iPod. I suspected my sister might be taking them, but I couldn't prove it. When I couldn't find my old military ID, I worried she might try to use it. So I reported it stolen and got a replacement. And did you inform your family of this? Yes, ma'am. I told my mother in person and followed up with a text message. I specifically said that if she found my old ID anywhere in the house, she should destroy it because I'd reported it stolen. Captain Reeves submitted the text messages into evidence. The jury examined them. What happened next? I put my new ID in my barracks safe. I didn't keep any military credentials at my mother's house after that. I moved everything important to base. And then, about 3 weeks later, I saw suspicious activity on my credit report. Someone had tried to open a credit card in my name. I reported it to military police and to the credit bureaus. The MPs began an investigation. Did you suspect your sister? Yes, ma'am. Why? Because she was the only person who had access to my personal information. She lived in the house where I'd kept important documents before moving them to base. And she had a history of taking things that didn't belong to her. Morrison stood. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is characterizing the defendant's character without factual basis. The judge looked at me. Can you provide specific examples, Staff Sergeant? Yes, Your Honor. I pulled out my phone, accessed the notes I'd been keeping since my rebirth. In high school, Amanda was caught stealing from the drama department's fundraiser. The school didn't press charges because my mother reimbursed the money. 2 years later, she was fired from her job at Nordstrom for stealing merchandise. Again, my mother paid restitution. When she was 19, her roommate accused her of stealing jewelry and electronics. The roommate didn't press charges because Amanda returned some of the items and my mother paid for the rest. Morrison's face went red. Your Honor, these are documented incidents, Captain Reeves said smoothly. We have the school records, the employment termination, the paperwork, and a sworn statement from the former roommate. If defense would like to challenge their authenticity... Continue, Staff Sergeant, the judge said. I continued. After I reported the credit card fraud to the MPs, they began monitoring for use of my stolen military ID. When it was used at the commissary, they were already in position to make an arrest. Why didn't you warn your sister that the ID was being monitored? Because warning someone not to commit a federal crime implies that they might otherwise do so, ma'am. I shouldn't have to warn my sister not to steal my identity. A small smile crossed Captain Reeves's face. No further questions. Morrison approached for cross-examination. He was good, I had to admit. Smooth. Sympathetic. Staff Sergeant Richardson, you and your sister don't get along, do you? We have a complicated relationship. Would you say you resent her? No. Really? Your mother's testified that you've always been competitive with Amanda. That you were jealous of her? That was a lie. Mom's statement had said no such thing. But Morrison was gambling that I wouldn't know what Mom had actually said. My mother is mistaken. Is she? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like an elaborate setup. You report your ID stolen before anything happens. You tell your mother about it, but you don't tell Amanda. Why would I need to tell Amanda? Not to steal from me? And then you wait. You let her use the ID. You don't warn her, don't stop her, just let her walk right into your trap. The only trap was the one Amanda set for herself by committing crimes. Objection, Morrison said. Assumes facts, not in evidence. Sustained, the judge said mildly. Morrison leaned in. Isn't it true that you've always been jealous of your sister? That you resented her relationship with your mother? No. Isn't it true that you wanted to punish her? No. Then why did you cooperate so extensively with the prosecution? Why did you investigate her other alleged victims? Why did you build this case against your own sister, if not out of vindictiveness? I looked at him steadily. Because she committed crimes. Because she stole from multiple people. Because if I didn't stop her, she would have continued. And because I turned to look directly at the jury. My sister would have let me take the fall for her crimes if she'd gotten caught. She would have testified that I'd been involved, that I'd helped her, that it was my idea. She would have destroyed my life to save herself, so I protected myself first. Morrison's eyes narrowed. You can't possibly know that. But I did know that. I knew it with every fiber of my being. I know my sister, I said simply. And I saw it then. A flicker of uncertainty in Morrison's expression. Because he knew it too. He'd talked to Amanda, he'd seen her character, he knew exactly what kind of person she was. He just had to pretend he didn't. The prosecution's case was devastating. They called the MPs who'd arrested Amanda. They submitted the commissary's surveillance footage, which showed Amanda confidently handing over my ID, showed her loading up carts full of premium goods. They called the online reseller who'd unknowingly bought stolen commissary items from Amanda. He testified about the volume of goods, the frequency of sales, the sophisticated system she'd set up. They called Amanda's ex-boyfriend, who described finding his credit card charges he hadn't made. His voice shook when he testified about confronting Amanda, about her tears and excuses, about how she'd convinced him not to press charges. They called Mom's neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who testified about her missing credit card. She'd thought she'd lost it. She'd never suspected Amanda, the sweet girl next door who sometimes helped her carry groceries. Not until the MPs came asking questions. They called Amanda's former roommate, Kayla, who testified about missing jewelry, about electronics that vanished, about Amanda's increasingly elaborate lies. She was my best friend, Kayla said, crying on the stand. I trusted her with everything, and she stole from me. When I confronted her, she said I was crazy, that I'd lost the items myself. She made me doubt my own memory. And then I found my necklace, my grandmother's necklace, listed on eBay under Amanda's account. The evidence piled up, credit card statements, bank records, online sales accounts, all tied back to Amanda. The defense tried to poke holes, tried to suggest that these were misunderstandings, youthful mistakes, things taken out of context. But the numbers didn't lie. In 18 months, Amanda had stolen and resold over $40,000 worth of goods and services. She'd opened 7 credit cards in other people's names. She'd committed fraud across state lines, making it federal. And then it was Amanda's turn to testify. Morrison had prepared her well, I had to admit. Amanda took the stand wearing a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked young and scared and sorry. She cried as she testified about her troubled childhood after Dad died, about how hard it had been, how she'd struggled, how she'd made mistakes. I know I shouldn't have used Jess's ID, she said, her voice breaking. But I didn't think it was a big deal. We'd shared things before. She'd let me use her military discount before. That was a lie. I'd never let her use my discount. But Morrison didn't know that, and I couldn't jump up and shout objections. And I thought she wouldn't mind. I was struggling financially. I'd lost my job. I needed groceries. I didn't realize I was committing a crime. What about the other incidents? Morrison asked gently. The credit card, the online sales. Those were misunderstandings, Amanda said. The credit cards, I sometimes borrowed them with permission, and I always intended to pay people back. The online sales were just me selling my own things. People are confused about what belonged to me and what didn't. What about your former roommate's grandmother's necklace? Amanda's face crumpled. That was mine. My grandmother gave me a similar necklace. Kayla saw it and assumed it was hers. We had a fight about it. I listed my necklace on eBay because I needed money, and she saw it and jumped to conclusions. It was so smooth, so practiced. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her myself. Morrison led her through each incident, giving her a chance to explain, to spin, to justify. And Amanda played her part perfectly. The struggling young woman, the misunderstood daughter, the victim of circumstances and cruel accusations. Then Captain Reeves stood for cross-examination, and everything changed. Ms. Richardson, she began, you testified that you thought you had permission to use your sister's military ID, correct? Yes. When did she give you this permission? Amanda hesitated. It was informal. We'd talked about it. When? I don't remember exactly. Was it before or after she reported the ID stolen? I didn't know she'd reported it stolen. Your mother testified that Staff Sergeant Richardson told her about reporting the ID stolen. You lived in the same house. Your mother didn't mention it to you? She might have. I don't remember. Captain Reeves pulled out a phone record. These are text messages between you and your mother, dated 2 days after Staff Sergeant Richardson reported her ID stolen. Your mother says, quote, Jess says her military ID was stolen. If you find it, throw it away. You responded, okay. Do you remember that? Amanda's face went pale. That was about something else. About what else? What other military ID could your mother have been referring to? I don't know. I don't remember. But you testified that you didn't know the ID was reported stolen. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Objection. Morrison was on his feet, badgering the witness. Sustained. Rephrase, Captain. Ms. Richardson, were you aware that your sister had reported her military ID stolen before you used it at the commissary? Amanda's hands were shaking. I might have known, but I thought it was a mistake. I thought she'd just lost it and was being dramatic. So you did know. I thought it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that you never clarified with your sister? A misunderstanding that you proceeded to exploit by using the lost ID to commit fraud? It wasn't fraud. What about the credit cards, Ms. Richardson? You testified that you borrowed them with permission. Do you have any proof of that permission? Any text messages, any witnesses? It was verbal. How convenient. What about the commissary goods you resold online? You made over $15,000 selling those items. Where did you report that income on your taxes? Amanda froze. I don't. You didn't report it, did you? Because that would be tax fraud on top of everything else. Objection. Withdrawn. Captain Reeves smiled. Let's talk about your former roommate's necklace. You claimed it was yours, that your grandmother gave you a similar one. Do you have any proof of that? Any photographs, any documentation? My grandmother is dead. I'm sorry for your loss, but that's not what I asked. Do you have any proof that you owned a similar necklace? I don't keep receipts for gifts. What about insurance? If the necklace was valuable enough to list on eBay for $1,200, surely you would have insured it. Amanda was trapped, and she knew it. Every answer led to another question, another contradiction, another exposed lie. Captain Reeves methodically dismantled every piece of Amanda's testimony, every excuse, every justification, every claim of misunderstanding. By the end, Amanda was crying openly, her carefully constructed image shattered. No further questions, Captain Reeves said. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, still in my dress uniform, and waited. Captain Reeves sat with me, going over her notes even though the trial was over. You did well, she said. Your testimony was solid. Thank you. How are you holding up? I thought about Nitas better than I expected. It's hard, testifying against family. She's not my family, not really, not anymore. Captain Reeves gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Even so, this can't be easy. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and it was justice. Mom sat on the other side of the hallway, as far from me as she could get. She'd testified for the defense, had vouched for Amanda's character, had begged the jury to be lenient. She looked smaller now, worn down by illness and stress. Part of me wanted to go to her, to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay, but it wouldn't be okay, and she'd made her choice. The bailiff emerged. Jury's back. We filed into the courtroom. Amanda looked terrified, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Morrison put a hand on her shoulder, whispered something I couldn't hear. The jury foreman stood. In the case of United States versus Amanda Richardson, on the charge of unauthorized use of a military identification card, we find the defendant guilty. Amanda gasped. On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. She started crying. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of theft of government property, we find the defendant guilty. The foreman continued through all 17 charges. Guilty, guilty, guilty. By the end, Amanda was sobbing so hard she couldn't stand. Morrison had to hold her up. The judge set sentencing for 2 months out and revoked Amanda's bond. She was going into custody immediately. No, Amanda screamed as the marshals approached. Please, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. She looked at me then, and her face was a mask of hate and desperation. This is your fault, she shrieked. You did this. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. I looked back at her steadily, and I said the only thing that mattered. You ruined your own life. I just made sure you couldn't ruin mine. They led her away, still screaming, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication, just a quiet, settled feeling, like a book closing. Mom was crying in the gallery. She didn't look at me, didn't speak to me. I walked out of that courtroom alone, and I was okay with that. Amanda was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Morrison had argued for leniency, for her youth, for her lack of prior convictions, ignoring all the time she'd avoided prosecution because people like Mom had paid restitution. The judge wasn't swayed. Ms. Richardson engaged in a sophisticated, long-term pattern of fraud and identity theft, the judge said. She stole from family members, friends, and vulnerable individuals. She showed no remorse until she was caught, and even then, her remorse appears to be limited to regret at facing consequences, not regret for her actions. This court cannot ignore such blatant disregard for the law and for the people she harmed. 12 years, with good behavior, she'd serve 9. She'd be 32 when she got out, the age I'd been when I died in my first life. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Mom died 18 months after Amanda was sentenced. The cancer came back, aggressive and fast. I'd done everything I could, gotten her to the best specialists, paid for experimental treatments, used everything I'd learned in my first life to give her more time. But some things couldn't be changed. Some things were always going to happen. She was lucid at the end, in the hospice room with afternoon light streaming through the windows. I sat next to her bed, holding her hand. We hadn't reconciled, not really. She'd been furious with me after the trial, had blamed me for Amanda's imprisonment, had refused to speak to me for months. But when she got sick, really sick, I was the only one there. Amanda was in prison. Her friends had drifted away. I was all she had left. I was wrong, she whispered, her voice barely audible. About Amanda, about you. I squeezed her hand. She wrote me letters from prison, Mom continued, asking for money, demanding it, saying I owed her, saying if I'd been a better mother, if I'd given her more, she wouldn't have had to steal. A tear ran down her cheek. She never asked how I was doing, never asked about my treatment. Just what I could do for her. I'm sorry, Mom. Don't be. You tried to tell me, I didn't listen. She coughed, a wet, rattling sound. I failed you both. I spoiled Amanda and I neglected you, and now, don't, I said, don't do this now. I have to. I don't have much time left. Her grip tightened on my hand. Jess, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You deserved better. You deserved a mother who saw you, who protected you, who chose you sometimes. And I didn't do that. The tears came then, surprising me. I thought I'd cried this out already, in my first life, in the years when Mom was gone and I was alone. But grief was funny that way. It came back in waves. I forgive you, I said, because she needed to hear it and because, surprisingly, I meant it. I forgive you, Mom. She smiled just a little. You're a better person than I am. I had a good example of what not to do. She laughed, then coughed again. When she settled, she said, "The house is yours. Everything is yours. I changed my will after the trial. Amanda doesn't get anything. Mom, she doesn't deserve it. And you've been here. You've taken care of me. You've been the daughter I needed, even when I didn't deserve it." Her eyes were closing. "I'm so proud of you, Jess. I should have said that more. I'm so, so proud." Those were the last words she said to me. She died that night, peacefully, in her sleep. I was there, holding her hand. And this time, I got to say goodbye. I scattered Mom's ashes in the lake where Dad had proposed to her, where we'd gone camping as a family before everything fell apart. It was just me. No other family, no big ceremony, just me and the water and the memories. Amanda sent a letter from prison asking to be allowed to attend the funeral. I didn't respond. There was no funeral to attend. Mom had wanted it this way, small, private, no fuss. I think part of her hadn't wanted Amanda there either. After Mom died, I took a week of leave and went through the house, boxing up memories, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Most of it went to charity. I kept a few photographs, some of Dad's things, Mom's jewelry. I found my old room exactly as I'd left it when I moved to the barracks. Found Amanda's room, still decorated like a teenager's, frozen in time from before her arrest. In her closet, I found boxes of stolen goods she'd never sold. Designer handbags, electronics, jewelry that didn't belong to her, evidence of years of theft that had never been discovered. I called Captain Reeves and had her document it all. More victims were identified, more restitution was ordered, though Amanda had nothing to pay with. The house sold. Quickly. Nice neighborhood, good schools, well-maintained. I used the money to pay off Mom's medical debts and donated the rest to a charity for veterans struggling with financial fraud. I didn't need it. I had my career, my salary, my future. Everything Amanda had tried to take from me, I'd kept. Everything she'd thought she'd gained, she'd lost. 5 years after Amanda's conviction, I made captain. Colonel Morrison pinned on my bars herself, a rare honor. "You've earned this, Richardson," she said. "Your integrity, your dedication, your performance, exemplary." I stood at attention, feeling the weight of the new rank, the new responsibility. In my first life, I'd never made it past staff sergeant. I'd been discharged before I had the chance. This time, the path was open. This time, I could build the career I'd always wanted. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and the handshakes, I went back to my office and found a letter waiting. Prison mail, Amanda's handwriting. I'd gotten a few over the years. Angry letters at first, blaming me for everything. Then manipulative ones trying to guilt me into helping her appeal. Then desperate ones begging for money, for visits, for anything. I'd never responded. Never given her anything. This letter was different. "Jess, I know you won't respond to this. You never do. But I need to say it anyway. I've had a lot of time to think in here. A lot of time to face what I did. And I need you to know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for stealing from you. I'm sorry for using your identity. I'm sorry for planning to destroy you to save myself. Because you were right. I would have done that. I would have testified against you, would have blamed you for everything, would have watched you go down for my crimes and felt nothing. I don't know why I was like that. Maybe because Mom always protected me. Maybe because I learned early that I could get away with things if I cried enough, apologized enough, blamed someone else. Maybe I'm just fundamentally broken. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I was, what I did, the people I hurt. You tried to save me from myself by turning me in. I hated you for it. I screamed at you in court that you'd ruined my life. But you didn't ruin my life. I did that all by myself. You just made sure I couldn't ruin yours too. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you, but I needed to say it. I'm sorry for all of it. Your sister, Amanda. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to believe it was manipulation, another scheme, another lie, but it didn't read like manipulation. It read like someone who'd hit rock bottom and was finally seeing clearly. Maybe it was real. Maybe Amanda had actually changed. Maybe prison had done what nothing else could. shown her consequences she couldn't charm or cry her way out of. Or maybe this was just another layer of manipulation and she was still the same person who'd stolen from everyone she knew without remorse. I didn't know, and I realized sitting there with the letter in my hands that I didn't need to know. Amanda's redemption or lack thereof wasn't my responsibility. Her growth, her change, her future, none of it was mine to manage or fix or save. I'd saved myself. That was enough. I put the letter in a drawer and went back to work. 10 years after my rebirth, I married another officer, a good man named David who treated me with respect and kindness. We had a small wedding on base, just close friends and colleagues. Amanda was still in prison. She'd be out in another 2 years. I didn't know what she'd do then, where she'd go, who she'd become. I didn't spend time wondering. I'd built a good life, a career I was proud of, friendships that mattered, a relationship based on honesty and trust. Everything I'd lost in my first life, I'd reclaimed in my second. Sometimes, late at night, David would ask me why I kept myself so guarded, why I was so careful with money, with trust, with personal information. I'd tell him I'd seen too many soldiers destroyed by identity theft, by fraud, by people who should have protected them. It was true, if incomplete. He didn't need to know about my first life, about dying alone, about the rebirth that gave me a second chance. Some things were mine to carry. 12 years after Amanda's conviction, she was released from prison. I found out through a notification from the Victim Services Program. She'd served her full sentence, no early release. She emerged at age 32, the same age I'd been when I died the first time. I wondered if she felt what I'd felt then, the weight of wasted years, the knowledge that life had passed her by, the desperate struggle to start over with nothing. She tried to contact me once through Facebook. A simple message, "I'm out, I'm starting over, I don't expect anything from you. But I wanted you to know I made it." I didn't respond. Didn't block her either, just left it unread. She wasn't my responsibility, never had been. 6 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd gotten a job at a warehouse, was living in a halfway house, was attending therapy. She was trying. Whether she'd succeed or fall back into old patterns, I didn't know. I hoped for her sake she'd succeed, not for my sake. I didn't need anything from her, but for hers. Because living the way she'd lived before, being the person she'd been before, had cost her everything. Maybe that was lesson enough. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my problem to solve. 15 years after my rebirth, I made lieutenant colonel. I stood in my dress uniform looking at my reflection in the mirror, and I barely recognized the woman staring back. She was confident, accomplished, respected. She had rank insignia that represented years of hard work and dedication. She had a husband who loved her, colleagues who valued her, a future that stretched out bright and promising. She was everything I'd wanted to be in my first life and never got the chance to become. I thought about that scared 23-year-old who'd woken up with memories of a life not yet lived, who'd known exactly what was coming and had chosen to fight instead of accept it. I thought about Amanda, wherever she was, hopefully building a better life. I thought about Mom, gone now for over a decade, and hoped she'd found peace. Mostly, I thought about the moment in that commissary parking lot when Amanda realized she'd been caught. When she'd looked at me and seen not her trusting older sister, but someone who'd outplayed her completely. That moment had been worth everything. The planning, the patience, the pain. Because in that moment, Amanda learned what I'd learned in my first life. That actions have consequences. That you can't charm or manipulate your way out of everything. That eventually the bill comes due. She'd just learned it, with her freedom and future on the line instead of mine. And I'd learned something else, something more important. I'd learned that I was strong enough to save myself, that I didn't need to accept betrayal, didn't need to enable destruction, didn't need to sacrifice myself to protect someone who'd never protect me. I'd learned that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. The MPs had been waiting in that parking lot just like the title said they would be, but they hadn't been waiting to arrest me like they had the first time. They'd been waiting to arrest the person who'd actually committed the crime, and that made all the difference. I adjusted my uniform one last time, straightened my new rank insignia, and walked out of my office with my head high. I'd been given a second chance at life, and I'd used it to build something worth living for. Not revenge, though that had been satisfying. Not even justice, though Amanda had certainly faced that. But freedom. Freedom from betrayal, from manipulation, from accepting less than I deserve because family was supposed to mean something. Family did mean something. It meant loyalty worked both ways. It meant protecting each other, not destroying each other. And when someone in your family chose destruction, chose betrayal, chose crime, well, then the MPs in the parking lot weren't just waiting. They were exactly where they needed to be.
Last Cry was not a fun cry. No, no, no. Last Cry was decidedly less fun and funny. Yeah. Schedule size doesn't matter. It's how you schedule. Link just a, yeah, some sort of emoji. Yeah, yeah. Stumpy, your first stream is very soon, is it not? Well, not first stream ever, but first stream back. Let us know. You better freaking post it. Hi, Kaylee. Yes, we are, Omerta. Are we human or are we dancer? I've never known. Oh my god, Seth. I should paint a superb owl. Wait, I should. That'd be really cute. Oh my god, my roommate just yelled, "Ah, fuck you," in the kitchen. Must have seen the mouse, TM. I'm sorry, is there a mouse? Dreamer, you know I need more information. The super bowel. Oh, well, yeah, also the Super Bowl. You watch that every year? Wait, you actually do? I don't even know who's playing. Who's in the game? Who's doing the big game? Who's making their big kicks and slides and do a little touch of each other's butts every now and then, just a little bit to show support? Seahawks, Patriots. Okay, I'm going for Seattle because it's suburb.